right. Good morning, everybody. Today is Friday. Hey, we made it Friday, October 23rd, 2015. And this is Before the First Cup with Jules here on UCY.TV. Happy Friday, everybody. We always got to love when we finally make it. It gives me something to look forward to, that's for sure. The weeks go on and repeat themselves like the hamster wheel. So at least a Friday is a point in time to reach toward. And it's looking pretty nice here. It's right now 43 degrees and partly sunny here in upstate New York. But I got to tell you, it looks like a beautiful fall day is on tap. It's supposed to be sunny and no rain, but chilly. So bundle up, because fall is here. So where do we leave off yesterday? I ended up titling the show Medical Body Hacks, Light, Sound, Electricity, and Magnets. And that pretty much summed it all up. Now, we looked at some pretty strange medicine that they've been experimenting with, but it makes a lot of sense. I mean, like we said, this is stuff that many thousands of years of ancient medicine has practiced in regards to like acupuncture and things of that nature with the prime meridians. And one of the things that we discovered is that DARPA, among others, have found that the vagus nerve that we've talked about many times is that main nerve that connects your gut to your brain. And they now have shown that there is a lot of influence from the gut to the brain for your emotions and your health. But they also talked about how the vagus nerve snakes through the abdomen and the central region of the body, and it connects all of your major organs as well. So it snakes over to, I think we saw the spleen and the heart and the lungs and the stomach before it gets up to the brain. So now they've been playing, and this is just such Frankenstein science, just like the day before yesterday when we did the show on bioethics. Well, here you go. I mean, I don't know what your thoughts are on the ethics of biohacking. I guess that's what you would call it. But this is just the beginning, people. I mean, if they're able to do this with us being biological machines, imagine what they're going to be able to do once we have become synthetic. We have all of this new synthetic biology that's integrated with our own biology 1.0. And we have become a node on the Internet of Things, because that really is what's going to happen. And we know right now we have DARPA working on this new Sentry software that really is going to be like the version 1.0 of Skynet, where it's going to be able to patrol the perimeter of the quote-unquote Internet of Things, detect threats, and react to threats, neutralizing them if necessary without human intervention. Almost sounds like unmanned aerial vehicles with the kill switch. Well, not a kill switch, but a kill option of things on the ground. But in the physical world versus the internet. So, I don't know. Anyway, the show was very enlightening yesterday. If you missed that one, make sure you hit YouTube. It's, don't hit restart now. I got to stop this computer from doing this. It's been doing it every day to me now. It's called Medical Body Hacks, Light, Sound, Electricity, and Magnets. But the articles in the description were just mind-blowing. All right, so we're going to continue a little bit on there. There was a story that we ended with at the end of the show, and I only made it about a paragraph and a half into the story before we ran out of time. It's titled Mind Hack. Scientists use magnets to change attitudes on immigration and religion. I started thinking about a couple things here after the show yesterday. So let's read this and then we'll talk about it. Researchers from the University of York have used magnetic energy to suppress humans' quote unquote threat response functions and dramatically change people's attitudes to immigration. How interesting, too, that they're doing studies now about how to change people's attitudes about immigration. Why would that be so important? Oh, we don't have millions of immigrants now pouring all over the Middle East, turning all of these countries, and a lot of them are already polluted from their original populace. And I'm not saying polluted in a bad way. I'm just saying polluted when when you have a pot of ingredients and you just start pouring in whatever you can find, it's going to be an interesting combination. When you have a recipe in mind and it's all of that recipe, then it's going to be one big happy medley. And I don't know, the real world doesn't really work like that, but you got thousands of years of history in Europe, especially. Here we're still a young country, but there are thousands of years of history for Europe and some of these European nations, many of these European nations. And they traditionally kept to themselves. They defended their borders. Strangers weren't welcome. That's how it worked. That was how it worked. But now we have migrants from all of this upheaval happening all over the Middle East, and these people are looking for places to live. We have all these migrant crises happening at all the different European borders, and some of the even like Hungary, and I think I saw Slovenia. I mean, it looks like they're all moving east as well as west. And it's a real issue because they're all from Syria, and I don't know if they came out of, I mean, I know that there were all these tent cities that were around all the borders of Syria before, and some of those people may be moving as well. But typically, any migrant that is coming from a war-torn country looking for a new life is going to have different customs than you or me when they come to our country. And when you multiply that by millions and millions of migrants now moving, looking for a new place to call home, you could see how countries such as Germany, I mean, Germany, really? You're talking former Nazi Germany is now opening their arms to, how many millions did she say, Merkel? There was a lot. So we're now going to have this big melting pot of people from other cultures coming into these European, traditionally purer European countries than the United States. Like, we've always been the melting pot. And how is that going to affect future generations? There might be a loss of culture. There might be, some definite tensions. There might be upheaval, kind of breaks apart your close-knit communities. If now you have people, strangers moving in all over, and you're overwhelmed as a country by the numbers. I don't know. I don't really want to dwell on this migrant situation or immigration, but it just struck me as odd that they're doing DARPA experiments. I mean, these are DARPA experiments. I don't care. They could say it's from the University of York all they want. But they're talking about using magnetic energies and light and some of these other ones and light to get you to drop the fear response. Now, I know, you go back through my titles, I know we did stories about stuff like that where like they shine a little light or something or magnet on little Mousie's brain, and little Mousie isn't scared of the cat anymore. Well, that's kind of what some of the stuff is exploring, is how to get us to give up all this angst we have. Angst against all this migration. I mean, this is part of the grand chessboard. They wanted to destabilize all these nations. And what destabilizes a nation more than anything else? Having millions of migrants from other countries that have nothing in common with you, that are lost. And who knows, people have all kinds of hateful feelings and rumors. They're terrorists. Maybe some of them are terrorists, but I bet you there's some of them that are just innocent families that have been caught in the crossfire that are trying to find a safe home to raise their kids in. But regardless of who they are or what they are, is causing great strife and upheaval in Europe. So strife and upheaval always creates a non-cohesive group. It's going to make them unorganized and not able to battle this global takeover that we all need to be keeping our eye on the ball on. All right, let's go back now. So I made it through one sentence in the story and got off on a 15-minute tangent. All right, we'll start over. Researchers from the University of York have used magnetic energy to suppress humans' threat response functions and dramatically changed people's attitudes on immigration. It still just sounds like someone slapped that onto the end of the sentence. Psychologists use magnetic force to safely shut down the region of the brain. Like they're shutting, this is just so bizarre. To safely shut down the region of the brain associated with threat response functions, and conducted a series of tests when volunteers were asked questions about their beliefs. Scientists found that people were less likely to have negative views when the magnetic force was applied to the posterior medial frontal cortex, which is positioned a few inches up in the forehead. That's interesting too. In the study, half of participants were given a low-level placebo-like level of magnetic energy that did not affect their brain, while the other half received enough energy to lower activity in the target area. Volunteers were then asked to think about death, after which they were questioned about their religious beliefs and their attitudes on immigration. Again, like in the story, like if you don't really understand what's going on over in the Middle East and Europe, and you just were reading the story, you'd be like, why do they care about immigration? But it makes much more sense now. Of course, the religion thing we're going to talk about. Researchers from the University of York and the University of California, UCLA, discovered those whose frontal cortex was temporarily shut down reported 32.8% less belief in gods, angels, or heaven. Volunteers were screened prior to the investigation to ensure that they held religious beliefs. The participants were also 28.5% more positive in their feelings toward an immigrant who criticized their country. Oh, it's odd. And Dr. Kees Izuma said volunteers were reminded about death because people are more likely, and here's the money shot, to turn to ideologies when they think of dying. Oh. Oh. So let's stop for a second now, because last night when I was reading this, I started to see little puzzle pieces click in. I was like, oh, I see what this research is all about. As we have this medical wizardry, that's what I'd like to call it, because that's pretty much what it is. But it's beyond wizardry. I mean, it's mad science, but it looks like medical wizardry to the majority of people who sit around and watch it all happen on TV. And as they see this medical wizardry and all these wondrous cures, we can cure everything. We can cure your cancer, Johnny. Just step right up and let us put a few of these little itty bitty nanobots we don't even need needles anymore. We can do these dissolvable patches right on your arm. Right here, let's have a nanobot banana vaccine. I don't know. All that stuff's floating around out there somewhere. Come on, little Johnny. It will make you live forever. Right? The promise of immortality. We discovered that's where all this is leading. That's why all these billionaires are investing. They're getting older. And the promise of immortality is really there. Kurzweil's been talking about that forever. He wants to upload his brain to the cloud. Like Tron. Did you guys ever see Tron? I saw Tron in the 80s. It was a great movie. The guy got sucked into the video game. He had to ride those little deathmatch motorcycles. And I think he got out. It was Jeff Bridges, wasn't it? I think he got out finally at the end. And it ended up being not a very nice place. The guy that was ruling the video game was a villain. But anyway, back to the story. I'm just being silly. Okay, wait, here, we got a quote. So, Dr. Keith Izuma said volunteers were reminded about death because people are more likely to turn to ideologies when they think of dying. Quote, we decided to remind people of death because previous research has shown that people turn to religion for comfort in the face of death. And as expected, we found that when we experimentally turned down the posterior medial frontal cortex, people were less inclined to reach for comforting religious ideas despite having been reminded of death, he said. So, when they stimulate the posterior medial frontal cortex with magnets, people tend to not believe in a God anymore. They tend not to believe in religion anymore. They are not afraid of death anymore. Now, do you see the scariness this is leading to? So people like you or me, I'm not afraid of death, nor am I a religious crazy, but I do have some very strong beliefs in regards to tinkering with nature and screwing up biology 1.0. I don't want to be a 2.0. And that's a very strong conviction to me. You will never convince me that I want to be augmented, or that I want my child to be augmented, or that I want to eat bastardized, mad science gone mad, RNA GMO food, or edible vaccines, any of it, or bug protein. I have very strong convictions against all that stuff. Well, I'm going to say that by setting up this medical godship, which is what they are viewed as, especially as they start curing people, the doctors will start to be considered gods. They're going to make you not afraid of death anymore. These are magnetic fields. What I need to dig into is looking at the electromagnetic spectrum. We might have to do a whole show on that one day. And looking at the different frequencies. I think we read yesterday that vagus nerve stimulation was like 5,000 hertz. I was like, whoa, that's pretty high. I'm not really sure what wavelength that is or what types of devices use 5,000 hertz. But there was some sort of dampening effect that happened when it entered the body. But I'd like to understand using these magnets. We already have all kinds of electromagnetism that's all over. Are they somehow, I mean, honestly, there have been people that I've always kind of dubbed as a little bit lunatic fringe that have talked about being able to manipulate brain waves with different types of like wide range frequencies. I mean, people have talked about HARP and ELF for a really long time. But there are all kinds of experiments that show that you can manipulate brain chemicals in emotions. And now we found the vagus nerve, and the vagus nerve controls it all with different frequencies. So I'm not going to say that that's necessarily lunatic fringe anymore. So think about this. So we find a way to manipulate people's brains. And I remember way back, maybe 3 years ago, and just recently, and I don't remember where I saw it now. Oh, damn. There's a video I've been looking for a long time to talk about, and that was a CIA one or an FBI one. I don't know what they were. I think it was CIA, and they were doing a presentation on this Funvax. Do you remember that? And it was talking about radicals in the Middle East, and they had found a way to de-radicalize them, get them to forget about their religion. And I thought it was a vaccine, the Funvax. Oh, actually. Well, I'm not going to get on that, but the reason why I'm bringing that up is because that was already back around in the mid-90s, early 2000s when they were in Iraq and they were trying to find ways to de-radicalize some of these insurgents, whether they were going to airdrop it or put it in their food or whatever they were going to do. But they've been messing around with this quote-unquote de-radicalization for a long time. And now that we have this community's police force joining with the Department of Justice to be hunting down quote-unquote homegrown terrorists, you know, all those radicals living under your bed and in your closet. And then I just saw that Obama was appointing a czar to be in charge of all this. Yes, another czar. How long is it going to be before all of us are declared to be radicals? And whether it's religious ideology or just a very strong conviction, because I'm pretty certain that those interact in the same areas of the brain, like something that someone from the outside looking in might even consider irrational because there is no budging your beliefs on something. And I'm pretty stubborn. But it's not just religious beliefs. It's something that you believe in, lock, stock, and barrel. That all interacts in the same part of the brain. So if they can use magnetic stimulation in that area to get you to forget all about it, wow, wouldn't that be a benefit to them? And like I said, to get people to stop being afraid of death and stop looking for God. You know, a long time ago, I don't remember if it was Carl Sagan or Dr. von Braun, but one of them had talked about being careful because once they weaponize space, that it's all over for us as they're coming up with all these great laser weapons that they're mounting to small jets and small drones. Pretty frightening. And you know they have some pretty scary stuff going on in space. And then we had someone like, I think it was Ronald Reagan, had come out when he was addressing, I was going to say Putin. No, he wasn't addressing Putin. Gorbachev. And, or at least, I don't know if he was addressing Gorbachev directly, but I know he was addressing the whole Russian situation. And he made a comment about, imagine if there was a threat from outside of our world and it would pull all nations together. And I don't know if you saw just recently, there's that star, and I'd have to go look at its actual name because it was a long string of numbers, but it was a couple hundred light years away, I believe. And scientists have been watching it since 2009, watching the patterns. And there's, you know, as objects go by the star, they have patterns of light that get dimmer and then get brighter based upon what's rotating or going around the star. Well, apparently this star has some really bizarro stuff going on. And they're not quite sure what it is. Michio, of course, comes out and he does a big, I'm sure he's probably going to talk about it in his book because he's always out there selling books. But Michio comes out and does this big thing about, oh, it's aliens. We're pretty sure that it's aliens. There is a real theory out there because they've been looking at the star for 6 years now. Oh, it's KIC 8462852. But these light patterns that they're getting and the reduction of light as something passes in front of the sun is greater than anything they've ever seen. And scientists are scratching their heads. They've ruled out any common space thing like, oh, I don't know, asteroid belts or, another planet or whatever because of the size. Because typically, astronomically, you only have a 1 or 2% reduction in sunlight when any of these heavenly bodies pass in front of the sun. But with this sun, we are talking about massive amounts of reduction of light, anywhere from 15 to 22%, I believe it was, of the light gets dimmed when these objects pass in front of the star. And they're like, wait a second. We just lost 22% of the light intensity of that star as that object passed in front of it. And we've only ever seen like 1 or 2% normally. That's got to be one big-ass structure, whatever it is. And there is nothing in the known universe that we know. And it also was not at regular intervals either, like an orbit would be. So they ruled out it being some monster planet like Jupiter, too. And so now they're kind of shrugging their shoulders going, holy crap, if it's that big and it's all irregular and it's not moving in an orbit, that's got to be some sort of like made object that's been put there. So now there's a big theory that it's very possible that it could be some other, it could be other things, but it could be some other intelligent civilization out there. As a matter of fact, good old Seth Shostak hopped on board, and they just turned the SETI telescopes toward that KIC. What's the number again? KIC 8462852 star to see if they could pick up any radio waves. So put on a seatbelt. But the reason why I'm talking about all this is because what Ronald Reagan said. If we were threatened with an outside force, it would bring the people of the world all together. And right now, one of the big things that divides people in the world is religion. But let's get rid of religion, even if it's by somehow stimulating part of your brain to make you not care about it anymore, even if it's dangling that immortality carrot to create brain chemicals that make you not care anymore, to reach for that poisoned apple. Or maybe we announce we found life in space. And now who's going to believe in their puny little religions anymore? We need to now become part of the global community. We need to now give up all of these things, these old world ways that divided us. Those are so 20th century, right? Didn't we read that statement like in 2 different stories in 2 days in a row? It's so 20th century. That's what's happening. The transition shift is happening. And not just at a local level. This is a global shift. And anyone who's ever talked about the New World Order taking over, they've been absolutely right. Because this is going to be this one world bullshit. Homogenized. Stick in the big wooden spoon and stir. And we will be recreated in, I don't know who, Kurzweil's image, maybe. That's what they're working on right now. So, I don't know. This may all sound like lunatic fringe, and I'm just kind of postulating here, but I'm telling you, I have a mind that remembers a lot of little details about unimportant things. But then one day, all those little unimportant things at the time, I'll go and start making little bells as all the check boxes go off. And then I realize what they all meant. I'm just saying, I am seeing some events line up here that are striking me as somewhat odd. Remember, I told you, always keep your eyes open for the little details that make you go, huh? Because that's typically where the truth is hiding. You just got to pull on the thread a little bit, and then it all comes apart. All right, anyway, where do I go? Now I'm like, I went from the frontal cortex with magnets, and now we're 100 light years away talking aliens. Let's get back to Earth. Actually, I should read that story because I didn't read it. Well, maybe we'll do it after this. All right, anyway. Let's finish reading the story about belief, though, because this, I really think they're going to use this to transplant themselves, just like the ancient Egyptians, where we had pharaohs who were the intermediary to God. The church has been so damaged by lack of trust with all of these sex scandals going on, molestation accusations. You know, the Pope's doing damage control, riding around. And he didn't ride in his Pope-mobile. I was surprised. But he was doing damage control as he was meeting with all these different countries and holding out his hand and talking about saving the planet as he's in bed with all these global leaders. You know, people are like, why is the Pope talking at the UN? Why is the Pope meeting with Congress? Why would the Pope be meeting with international leaders? Because you know why? Because they're getting ready for the next phase of this. And someone pointed out, too, that the Vatican actually has a telescope. They got lots of years of using it. I'm pretty sure that if the Vatican has a telescope, the Vatican's telescope has taken a good look at that KIC star that we were just talking about with the strange patterns. And if you remember, too, the Pope not too long ago came out and said that if we ever did find life, that they would be children of God as well. Remember that? Like, I thought that was weird, too. Like, why all of a sudden the church was coming out talking about aliens? I was waiting for Project Bluebeam, and we still might have it. You know, I mentioned to someone in chat last night, speaking of Project Bluebeam, and guys, I'm just, all this stuff, you can go find it. It's all out there. I've researched all this stuff. But when Obama, the very day that Obama was receiving that Peace Prize that they all want to take back now in Norway, the blue Norway spiral appeared. Did you know? That was the same freaking day. And everybody, I remember even in the very beginning, when the U.S. is like, oh, it's a Russian rocket gone bad. And my mother's like, oh, yeah, it's a rocket. It wasn't a freaking rocket. And the Russians even go, we didn't launch any rocket. Later, they reluctantly said, oh, yeah, that rocket. Yeah, sorry, we forgot. Yeah, we launched a rocket. But in the beginning, everybody was denying it. They didn't do anything. We don't fucking know what it is. Tell me if that isn't odd. I got to say, that was one of, that probably out of, I've seen a few strange things in my life. And I have to say, there's a couple that I still don't have full explanation for. But I got to say, that's way up there with probably the top 2 or 3. Some of the strangest ass shit I've ever seen. If you have not seen the Norway Blue Spiral, you don't remember that, do a search on YouTube. There's all kinds of, thousands of people recorded this thing in real time when it was happening. And another thing that I found out, we're not going to get that far off tangent because I can't go there today. Maybe we'll do a whole show on it. But I was very into investigating CERN, the Large Hadron Collider back in those days, which isn't too far away from Norway. It's, I don't remember what the actual circumference is, but it's a very large super collider underground that runs through the borders underground of a whole bunch of European nations. It's very large. not too far away from where they were and where that blue spiral appeared. But that very day, back when they still used to publish, and they still might, out on their Alice page or something, they used to publish all their real-time data, and when there was a big calendar, I could go out and see when all their new experiments were starting and what the new goal was for televolts for the next biggest explosion ever before seen by human beings on planet Earth to get as close as we can to the Big Bang, the beginning of it all. That also happened on the same day. Don't worry about it. You know what? It's just a real small chance that it might rip a hole in space-time. Or create mini black holes. Don't worry about it. So I just saw the other day, too, and this is so far off mark now, but I saw the other day, too, scientists at CERN announced that they had found primordial goo. Primordial goo. Primordial goo. Like what you learned about in Astronomy 101. I would even say, like, where do we learn about the Big Bang? Where do we first learn about that? What type of science? Maybe biology? Did we learn about that in biology? Or in... where would we have learned about the Big Bang? I don't know, whatever. But I know it was one of our, at least in high school, right? You learned about the Big Bang. We talked about it. And they said, and then what happened was primordial goo. It was like all the elements mushed up together. It didn't quite have any form or reason or anything going on yet. The very beginning, simplest formation of creation. And they created it here on Earth. I mean, if there ever was an endeavor going on right now that would be to make yourselves gods, like to be able to hold all that exists in creation in your hand, it would be what they're doing at CERN. So when you start, and these don't all look related, but they really are. When you start looking at the insanity that's going on in mad science and being able to conquer all of biology, turn us into live forever synthetic organisms, or at least hybrid organisms. And then you look at what they're doing in CERN, trying to create the creation. I mean, and then you look at the insanity going on planet Earth. I mean, it really is like anything goes. Rome is burning. Let's just go full tilt retard. Since it's all burning down anyway, let's just go all the way. I mean, it really seems that way to me. So anyway, I don't know. I usually just read my stories and don't postulate, but this is all this stuff is stuff that I've been following for a long time, just on my own personal research. Look it up. I'm telling you, look it up. If you haven't done any research into any of that stuff, look it up, because there's some scary ass, like really to the point of almost, I don't know, I don't want to say evil. I mean, I'm no Bible thumper, but I got to tell you, when I look at all of what we know across the board, and I start digging into some of these technologies and what the end result is and where some of these psychopaths are headed, there definitely is a line in the sand that divides light versus dark. And there are people that do things for real philanthropic reasons, because they care, because they are humanitarians, because they care about nature, because they care about children, because they care about the human race, and they want to see us grow and prosper and be here generations. They want to leave a positive imprint on this thing we call Earth, on this one short little string we call life. But there's the other side who want to manipulate and control it all. See, and that's those right there are traits of psychopathy. Lunatic fringe. Never lose. He who dies with the most toys wins. If there ever was a phrase that would encompass a psychopath, and at least the ones that I've known in my family, and yes, I have family members afflicted with the disease, which is why I've paid very close attention to my education on this. That's kind of what's happening. They don't care. They want to win. And they want to be the top dog. And they will do whatever it takes. Even if it's driving 180 miles an hour at a cliff playing chicken. If that's what it takes, that's what they'll do. And you know what? If you don't go along, then screw it. We're going over the edge. That's the way it works, man. They're not afraid. All right. Anyway, enough down that hole. Let's finish the story. I'm still on the first story. This is about this magnetic manipulation of the posterior medial frontal cortex. I should probably read that paragraph again since it's been 20 minutes and you guys all forgot it. Anyway, all right, let's go back up. Dr. Kees Izuma said, and hopefully this is all on air. I haven't even checked yet. Dr. Kees Uzuma said volunteers were reminded about death because people are more likely to turn to ideologies when they think of dying. We decided to remind people of death because previous research has shown that people return to religion for comfort in the face of death. And as expected, we found that when we experimentally turned down the posterior medial frontal cortex, people were less inclined to reach for comforting religious ideas, despite having been reminded of death. And people won't be afraid of death if we have these magic, godlike doctors working on all this magic science with little robot doctors in your bloodstream that'll cure you. Hey, we don't have to be worried about death anymore anyway. So why do you need to believe in God? Just saying. All right. Volunteers were asked to respond to a negative and to positive emotional aspects of religion, in part to rate their belief in the devil, demons, and hell, in addition to God, angels, and heaven. How interesting that they're getting people to look at this. Because I think these psychopaths, I mean, if there was any thread of truth to any of the traditional religious materials when it came to heaven and hell and fallen angels, I would say that these lunatics would be the fallen angels who got kicked out of the place where things were perfect and are now trying to become gods themselves as they bastardize biology. I don't know. It's just so odd that they're looking at this. All right. To rate their belief in the devil, demons, and hell, in addition to God, angels, and heaven. Participants were also given 2 essays to read, both supposedly written by immigrants. Weird. One essay was extremely complimentary to the host country, while the other was extremely critical. Scientists found that when the magnetic force temporarily shut down that threat response part of the brain, people were more likely to have positive feelings toward the immigrant who was critical. Why does this story sound like somebody just mixed it up really bad? We think that hearing criticisms of your group's values, perhaps especially from a person you perceive as an outsider, is processed as an ideological sort of threat. Of course it is. Who doesn't have a group of friends and some kid you don't know walks up and starts picking on someone in the group? You're going to go punch him in the face. That's what happens. One way to respond to such a threat is to double down on your group values, increasing your investment in them and reacting more negatively to the critic. When we disrupted the brain regions that usually help detect and respond to threats, we saw a less negative, less ideologically motivated reaction to the critical author and his opinions. And UCLA's Dr. Colin Hollenbrook, who was lead author of the report, he said that these findings were quote unquote striking. These findings are very striking and consistent with the idea that the brain mechanisms that evolve for relatively basic threat response functions are repurposed to also produce ideological reactions. Wow, this is like probably, thanks RT, probably one of the most half-baked piss-ass stories I've ever read. Like, they didn't connect any dots in the story. They almost made it sound like they're two separate things. I don't know. I think there was a story about this from my Science Alert magazine. So, you know what we'll do is I'm going to save this whole thing for Monday to dig into this magnetic manipulation and the religious thing, because I know that there's more out there. They didn't really address much of anything, but you know what's interesting with the entire brain project and DARPA being involved in all this, and like I said, we spent a whole show yesterday. There were like 5 stories of all these new technologies of manipulating body parts to do what they wanted them to do by using just light, sound, and magnets, you know. So it's not like this is Weirdoville here. I mean, this is really stuff that there's money going into. There are all these new startup companies, of course, venture capital, the sprinkle money coming from DARPA to create all these new companies for all these newfangled treatments that, of course, we're going to test on you and me. All right. Where do we want to go from here? Because I have done so much blabbering. I got like 8 articles queued up here, and I don't know if this is going to fly, but let's go to one that came out. Oh, if it loads, I can tell you. I'd have to say it was probably 2 or 3 weeks ago I posted this story, and I never got to it. But I actually, come on, load. Damn you. Refresh. Oh, God. Here we go. All right. This is, again, that IEEE Spectrum, which, you know, we used to get this magazine. My boyfriend in college was an electrical engineer. He was my rocket scientist. And we used to get the IEEE magazine. That's why I knew about this place. But come on, up. And I see, actually, the only one of my friends subscribed to this webpage is my boyfriend's old roommate, who is also an engineer. My former boyfriend, college boyfriend. We're all still friends. Okay. So check this out. Of course, we've talked about how they test all this mad science, and typically it's going to be with the most desperate and the dying, because we're going to cure you of death, right? Kurzweil had said that death was going to be cured like a disease. Well, we will cure you of death and what ails you. ALS patient. It's at Lou Gehrig's disease, I believe, is ALS. And we're going to test out some of these newfangled technologies that we've seen DARPA screwing around with. Hey, it's ready for prime time. In testing in the most desperate. We're going to move beyond soldiers who've been injured under the guise of war. And now we're going to move on to civilians, because there's more money in it. Neural implant enables paralyzed ALS patient to type 6 words per minute. What? Yes. Now it's not just using those encephalograms, I think they were called, ECG, I think that's what that stands for. Those little ECG headsets that you put on, and you can either type and control your mouse and keyboard or fly drones with, right? They have ones doing that too, all with the power of your mind. But now they actually have brain implants that you can plug in, like the Matrix. And right now, I mean, you can't do much, but you can still type on your keyboard. And, you know, I could see how that would be helpful for someone fully paralyzed from some disease. But on the other hand, desperate people would allow you to start putting transhumanist implants into my brain to see what's going to happen. Like, this just bothers me so bad when I see this. And there literally is a picture from behind of somebody sitting in a wheelchair looking quite not mobile with this big cable, like an old school gray printer cable with a big old freaking interface plugged into the top of their skull. That's the picture I used when I posted this. Nobody commented. I titled it something like "Brain Implants Are Here." And nobody batted an eye. Any of my friends, they're probably like, oh, look at that. Go get a brain implant. DARPA's got us lining up. All right. Let's get back there. Now, I clicked off of it, so now I'm lost. Okay. It says typing 6 words per minute may not sound very impressive, but for paralyzed people, typing via a brain-computer interface, affectionately known by DARPA as the BCI. And yeah, DARPA, if you search DARPA brain-computer interface, you'll find all kinds of stuff that we've probably done most of those stories over the last 3 or 4 years. It is a new world record for 6 words a minute. To pull off this feat, 2 paralyzed people use prosthetics implanted in their brains to control computer cursors with unprecedented accuracy and speed. The experiment, reported today in Nature Medicine, was the latest from a team testing a neural system called BrainGate 2. And remember, too, they're working on BrainNet. Do a search on that, where they're interconnecting multiple brains in a Borg-like interface. That's their hope. So we can all share thoughts and brain computing power in the cloud. On demand, according to Kurzweil. Anyway, back to this BrainGate 2. While this implant is only approved for experiments right now, researchers say that this demonstration proves that such technology can be truly useful to quadriplegics and points the way toward regular use at home. So I'm sure that somebody like Stephen Hawking, another quadriplegic, and he uses eye movements, I believe, to manipulate his computer. Wonder what he thinks about this, because I mean, this implant is pretty scary. Who wants to get an implant in their brain? And you know, I feel bad for this poor person with this Lou Gehrig's disease, but on the other hand, they're using this poor person as a guinea pig, because what else are they going to do? They don't have any other options. So they'd be very willing to stand up and say, sure, I'll give it a shot if I can help all these other Lou Gehrig's patients throughout history, that this is going to make a difference. But it's not just about that. It's about cracking all of the keys of biology. It's about cracking the mysteries, the brain, our last bastion of freedom, our own thoughts. To be able to have thoughts without them being invaded upon. They already can read dreams. We talked about that. They can get pictures out of your mind from what you're dreaming about. This is like the ultimate dystopia. We don't want them to crack the mysteries of the brain. I'm just fine with brain mysteries. Thank you very much. Anyway, it says the 2 people who volunteered for the study have amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, which is ALS, also known as, hey, I was right, Lou Gehrig's disease, a degenerative neural disorder that leads to complete paralysis. The lead researcher, Jamie Henderson, co-director of Stanford's Neural Prosthetics Translational Laboratory, so that's Stanford's den of demons, calls it a, quote, humbling experience, unquote, to work with quadriplegic patients who, what? Willingly. Yes, it's all about consent. Remember, people, I told you, they need to have consent. And the people who are going to consent to this mad science are the ones who are the most desperate and the dying. He calls it a humbling experience. And I really hope, Jamie Henderson, you're having a come to Jesus moment where you're looking at the morals and the ethics or the lack thereof of what your research in the end is leading toward. Yeah, we're going to help the quadriplegics. And that's what you're telling yourself it's about. But this is DARPA technology. It is not about helping the quadriplegics in the end. It is about cracking all of the mysteries of the brain. Anyway, to work with quadriplegic patients who willingly undergo brain surgery and devote themselves to science experiments that will push forward this early stage technology. And there you go, guys. I think I think it's about it. My music's going to start playing here any second unless I'm really off. I must be. It's Friday anyway. We're going to pause here. It's Friday. Make sure you guys stick around. We have Ms. Lonnie Clark coming up next. Oh, what time does my music start? I mean, I might need to go reset the clock on my server. Something's pretty off. I think so. Oh, well. Make sure you stick around. Lonnie Clark is up next, and it's Friday night. So Josh is live at 6. We have the boys from Primer Time. This week's replay, if you missed it, at 8. Truth on the Tracks with Mr. Brandon Turville at 9. Reality Bites with Neil Foster at 10. And Anti-Media Radio with LaVon at 11 p.m. Eastern. And guess what, guys? Brand new show starting tonight called Grimerica. Yes, I'm going to warn you. Parental discretion is advised. But you know what? It actually is a pretty cool show. It starts at midnight Eastern. Friday night into Saturday morning. All right, guys. Everyone have an awesome weekend. And I'll catch up with you on Monday. Yeah.